I'm going to answer 5 questions that will help you get the most out of UWorld during your MCAT studies. And those include questions like, what should I be taking? When should I take it? How do you review it? All those we're going to get into. The main purpose of this channel is to make medical school accessible to anyone that has the work ethic and the intelligence. And therefore, I usually focus on free MCAT resources so that anybody can access it regardless of your background. But this is not one of those videos. Today, I'm going to teach you how to use UWorld.
No! God, please, no!
Now, before I get into those questions, I'm going to give you a brief overview of what UWorld is. UWorld is just a giant section bank. It's like a big reservoir of practice questions for the MCAT. And so it doesn't have any full-length exams as far as like 8-hour exams, but it just has like over 3,000 questions with really solid explanations that allow you to go through and test your specific science knowledge without committing to like 8 hours worth of testing. Now, the reason that UWorld is so popular is because those explanations that I mentioned earlier are God tier. Like, they have great written explanations, they have great figures. Whoever is making those on their staff is really talented. And so, I mean, like whenever I used to tutor students off of UWorld, I would just be like, just read it. It's so much better than what I can tell you. And UWorld is actually a resource that I use every single day in medical school. It's a little bit more necessary in med school than it is as a pre-med. Regardless, you should get used to working with UWorld because it's a great resource. But it's pretty expensive. I'm looking at the pricing model here, and it's a subscription basis, so you can access it for as long as you want, but obviously you have to continue to pay for it. And you cannot account share. And the way that they prevent this, rather than kind of like pulling a straight Netflix and like pausing how many people access it, is they only allow you to take a single question once unless you pay to retake it. They do let you extend your access, which is a nice thing. For example, their pricing model, you can get the sample, which is 100 questions and a 7-day access for free. That's what we're about to go through in today's video. You get 90-day access for $300, 180-day access with one reset for $350, and then a whole year's worth of access for $400. And then I'll have my editor throw the pricing model up on the screen so that you can see the renewal prices as well. But because the renewal prices are essentially the cost for upgrading to the next package, it's probably best just to pick the package that you actually think will allow you to use all the resources in the shortest time period possible. If you can get through all 3,000 of these questions in 90 days, then just do the basic. And if you need another couple weeks to get through it, which I think is probably what's going to end up happening with me with med school, then you can do the 15-day renewal. So that's a good overview of UWorld and its pricing. So now let's answer the question, how do I work it? We'll take a look at the computer. Okay, so here I'm launching the MCAT question bank now. It's going to walk us through several prompts about just kind of getting acquainted with the system. So it's a good idea to read through these, but I'm going to kind of talk you through a couple of them as well. So to answer the question, how do I use it? It's really just me talking through this testing mode or this create a test function, because you don't have to really know too much about all of the settings and all these different things. They're not the most helpful, but I will show you how to use the notebook function, because that's something that I do find helpful. And the flashcards section right here, which is where you can actually make flashcards out of some of the facts or like the charts and stuff that they have in their explanations, is right here. But I actually prefer to take my flashcards and move them to an Anki deck. And that's just so that I have all my flashcards in one location. So if you follow this channel, you know I'm a huge proponent of using flashcards, because the MCAT is it's mostly a strategy and a problem-solving test, but you do have to know these buzzwords and these science facts before you even speak the language of practicing strategies and problem-solving. So going through here, you have the tutor mode versus the timed mode, and you can turn both of them on. Tutor mode just means whenever you click to the next question, it will give you the answer and the explanation for the previous question. Timed mode obviously means they're going to give you the allotted amount of time that would correlate to how much time you would have per question on the MCAT. These specific questions, unused, incorrect, marked, all, etc. This is just referencing out of the entire question bank, which ones do you want to take. So you'll probably always take the unused ones, unless you want to like reset your test and go back and look at the ones that you have already taken and the ones that you've missed, which is not a bad idea. And then the subjects and foundations, this is the really cool part of UWorld. So you have it, you can see broken down into specific scientific disciplines, so behavioral sciences, which is essentially psych, soc, biochem, etc. But the really cool part of UWorld, and how I will recommend that you use it as we get a little bit deeper into this video, is that you can expand these and it will actually allow you to test on specific topics, which is huge, right? Because if you are learning amino acids, it's great to be able to go and immediately test yourself. Now you see they have the free version, so I only have 14 out of 343 questions for this section unlocked. So these numbers are obviously underrepresentative of what you'll have once you get the full access. But this is the free access. So now it's time to start studying. We're going to answer the question, which questions should I take? Because UWorld allows you to separate questions based off of each specific topic, I actually recommend that you would only take the questions off of the sciences that you have studied in your content review. Now there's plenty of questions on this question bank, so as long as you're keeping a good pace with your content review, you won't run out. But doing that allows you to set the expectation that, okay, John, I can get every single one of these questions correct. And you won't, because UWorld is really hard. And I think the average percent correct on the med school side of things is like 63%. I think on the MCAT side of things is like 60% correct. So UWorld is difficult, but going in and using it as the opportunity to practice the application of sciences that you've already learned is perfect. It's what UWorld is for. It is not for practicing full-length exams. It's for practicing the application of the sciences you've already learned in a test-taking scenario, and it is great at that. The second question is, should I be timing this exam? And this is one that, it might change over the course of your studies. Timing is a really big struggle for a lot of MCAT students, and it was for me as well. And because it's such a big struggle, it's of course really important to take questions in timed conditions so that you can practice getting faster and more accurate at a comfortable speed. However, the biggest struggle for students is not timing. The biggest struggle is getting questions right? So we can all agree that timing is important, but getting questions right is paramount. It's the most important. So the way that I've always approached UWorld with pre-meds and now with myself in medical school is that if you're earlier on in your studying, you're more than like a month out from your exam, it's okay to take things in untimed conditions. Now this is not true for full lengths, they should always be timed, but for these section banks where you're practicing the application, you're just trying to wrap your brain around like passage scaffolding and how the AAMC does their witchcraft to like maneuver things around, it's okay to take it in an untimed condition because that will allow you to like remove the variable of I've got to go faster, and it will allow you to focus only on, can I get this question correct? Do I know what they're asking me? Am I picking up on the clues in the passage? And can I use those to get this question correct? So once you do that and you use the big three strategies that we teach on this channel, which are simplifying the question stem, using the flowchart method for science passages, and condensing it to main idea for CARS passages, then you can throw that timer on. But until then, you really just need to focus on walking before you run. I'll give an analogy to really drive this home. My best friend and I both started playing guitar at the same time in middle school. And I was really overeager to play songs at full tempo, I guess to try to impress people or maybe just to impress myself. But he was obsessed with being a good guitarist, and so he took his time, he learned proper form, he learned to play songs clean and perfectly before he started playing them at full speed. And the result of that is that I basically tapped out at campfire songs, and he can do this. So the moral of the story is be like Justin, focus on doing things right before you do things fast, and also subscribe to his YouTube channel because he makes some pretty good videos on guitar and music production. So question number 4 is, how do I review these questions once you take them? How do you actually learn from these UWorld questions? To answer that, let's take a look at some questions. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to unselect all of them, but surely I can get a MCAT question right about anatomy or human sciences. So let's just take, let's say I'll put in the possibility for 8 questions. But so here, these are all standalones. And then this is a passage base. So you see, it looks just like the real MCAT if you've taken it, or it looks a lot like the AAMC practice exams as well. So I'll show you both on a passage-based question and on a standalone question. So question 2, which statement most accurately describes the role of the T-tubules in skeletal muscle? So they're essentially asking, why do we need these? And they're specifically saying skeletal muscle. Now, if you remember, the T-tubules are like the extension of the plasma membrane that allow the calcium to come down and basically facilitate calcium so that you can contract your muscle at the same time. I think, if I'm wrong, then we're going to cut this from the video. So see, A says T-tubules bind acetylcholine at the NMJ to generate a depolarizing stimulus, maybe. B says depolarizing current reaches the sarcoplasmic reticulum by traveling down T-tubules. I like that because that's kind of what they do. C says Muscle contraction is driven by the sliding of two tubules across one another. No, they're talking about the sarcomere here, so maybe not C. D says T tubules sequester calcium out of the cytosol to prevent prolonged muscle contraction. That's referencing the sarcoplasmic reticulum, so maybe not D. So I'm going to go with answer choice B because I don't know that they bind. I think they're talking about the neuromuscular junction in A. Yay, I got it right. Let's say that you didn't know. Let's say you were part of these 13%. Now, what would be important is that as you're reading through this beautiful explanation, see, look at this drawing, this is great. Kind of walks you through like the neuromuscular junction. It even shows you the acetylcholine hitting and depolarizing, running to the T tubules to help you visualize it. This was a really good resource. And what's important is that you learn how and why they worded questions the way that they did. So if you really dive into the MCAT, then you'll see that all they really do here is they want to make sure that they include a true statement about a slightly tangential science. So there is something that binds acetylcholine at the neuromuscular junction to generate a depolarizing stimulus. It just ain't the T tubules. And muscle contraction is driven by the sliding of something across one another in the sarcomere. It just ain't the T tubules. So it's important that you learn these specific sciences and you clean that up so that whenever you're going through the answer choices like I did, you can say, oh, well, D is not T tubules that sequester calcium out of the cytosol. We're talking about the sarcoplasmic reticulum here. And that's what these answer choices do. You will essentially, especially on standalone questions, your main goal is just going to be, did I understand the question? Do I know the science? That's pretty much it. If you didn't understand the question, that's when you focus on that strategy, simplifying the question stem. If you didn't know the science, then that's actually preferred because then all you have to do is make a flashcard of it in your Anki deck and you won't miss it again. Okay, now let's take a look at a passage-based question. So I'm not going to read the passage or show you how to get the right answer. I'm just going to pick one. So we'll go B because it's always B. Hey, it is B. Sweet. Here you can see that there's a good bit more moving pieces in the explanation than the standalones. That's because standalones are largely like, do I understand what they're asking me? And can I apply the sciences that I know to get this question correct? Whereas passage-based questions rely a lot more heavily on whether or not you understand the passage itself and whether or not you're picking up on the little clues. So they do a great job of walking you through it and telling you the little clues that they gave during the passage. Now, they're not going to explicitly state those. They're not going to say in paragraph 2, I told you X, and you should have been thinking Y. That's more like something that Maggie or I would do in our passage breakdowns. But they will tell you the sciences, and they will walk you through this story that they were trying to craft in the passage, and then they'll give you an educational objective. Now, a big question is, okay, well, do I focus only on the educational objective? Absolutely not. There's a lot of gold in this stuff up here, in this kind of basic science overview up here. And then the educational objective is just a summary of the one specific thing that was tested in that specific question. So the top kind of goes over the whole concept, and the bottom kind of teaches you the one specific fact that you need to know for that question. So you want to learn the whole concept while you're there and put the pieces together so that they make sense. Don't take practice questions just to see where you are. Don't use it as like a measuring stick. You should really use it as an opportunity to improve. So if you take a question, you review a question. When it comes to strategies for reviewing UWorld, you need to have a clear focus of what UWorld is for. And that might be a little bit individual, but to me, UWorld is so that I can practice the application of sciences that I have already learned. Now that also helps me pick up content gaps and kind of practice some passage strategy. So I've got 3 things I'm trying to do with UWorld. I'm trying to identify content gaps, practice the application of sciences that I know, and use and practice some passage strategies. So that actually puts my approach and my review for questions into 2 boxes, and that is content or content gaps, maybe I'm not good at applying them, or strategy flaws. And the strategy flaws is usually going to manifest as like either I didn't pick up on a hint that they gave me in the passage in which you would want to fix with the flowchart method, or I didn't understand this question, I didn't break it down properly, and that's what you would want to fix with simplifying the question stem strategy. Now, once you figure out, like, maybe I missed this question because of a strategy flaw, it's really your job to go back through it and figure out why and where, whenever you're reading the passage, you didn't, where you kind of missed, why you skimmed over that. And I know that it's going to be a very difficult exercise at the very beginning, as far as just like looking at a question and asking yourself why you didn't think differently when you read it. But I'm telling you, it's a very fruitful exercise. And this may involve you rereading over the passage even though you already know the answers. And I think that that's a good idea too if you are meeting a roadblock. But I encourage you to think about those big 3 strategies I mentioned earlier while you're reading through these passages and reviewing these exams. So that's a strategy flaw. Now, if I identify a content gap, then I do one of 2 things. I either make an Anki card for it, or I actually add it to my notebook. So we'll talk about the notebook first. This is not a physical written notebook. This is actually a notebook. It's a function in UWorld. And so we will actually take advantage of that right now. So all you have to do is, if you find like a little fact or a blurb that you're like, oh, well, I don't really want to make a flashcard out of that, but I do want to have that written in a list so that I can quickly review it, then that's whenever I think it's appropriate to add it to my notebook. So, but I have 2 specific notes. I have one titled One-Liners, and the whole purpose of that is so that I can essentially have exactly what it sounds like. One-liners, maybe 1 to 2 sentence blurbs that are important that I just don't know yet, but they won't make a good flashcard because they're kind of scaffolding a whole concept rather than testing on one discrete fact or buzzword. And so I really, really like this One-Liners. It gives me like a document that's not that long, because I'm pretty picky about what goes on here, that I can just kind of reread over before I take a practice exam, and it only takes me like 20-30 minutes. So it's really good. It's a really big strength to be able to identify your weaknesses. And the One-Liners document for me is really great at helping me do that. Now, the other note that I keep in my notebook is just straight graphs and charts. UWorld does a really, really good job at making graphs and charts, as you can see now. So let's say that you didn't understand like the osteoclast-osteoblast relationship, and maybe you saw this diagram and you're like, oh, this is amazing. Well, you can just click it and then click add to your notebook, and I prefer to add that to a charts and graphs, add content here, and boom. And that's the exact same goal. Here I just want to have one long running list of all of the relevant charts and graphs. Now, you cannot copy and paste from UWorld into like a Word document, or from UWorld into like a Quizlet or an Anki deck. They don't allow it. And actually it has some kind of software that prevents it. If you want to do something like this, you will have to use their function, their notebook function. But I still think it's a great idea. Being able to quickly review the things that you have missed and just been like, wow, I have no clue what that was. Really, really good way to quickly patch some holes and maybe steal a couple extra points. So while UWorld has its own flashcard function, I still prefer to use Anki. And when possible, I prefer to use the pre-made flashcards that are already in my deck rather than making my own. So if I miss a question, say we missed one here on osteoclasts and osteoblasts, I would actually search in my browser for Anki osteoblasts, and I would read through those questions or those cards, because there won't be many, and see if there are any that address this fact that I was missing that forced me to miss this question. Sometimes you have to modify a pre-existing card just a little bit, or maybe add something into the extras tab. And I'll show you how to do that here in just a second, but it is always helpful, and it's a lot faster than trying to make your own cards. Now, sometimes you have to make your own cards too, and that's a whole different story. But for example, let's say that we missed a question on osteoblast. Now, this is my med school deck, so it's obviously a little bit different. But you would just search osteoblasts in the browse function, and you would go through here, and you would see if any of these address the question that you were missing. And if something is pretty close, but you want to slightly modify it, then you can either modify it up here, which is the main card, or you can modify it down in the extras tab, which is not what you're being tested on, but it's like that pink section that pops up at the bottom after you click the card, which if you're not reading that, you should. Now for the MCAT, I pretty much recommend the OnKing plus IFD deck, and I made a whole video on it. That deck contains the Mile Down deck and the Kaplan book set deck and like the Pixarized deck in it. So you will have access to all of those, plus that IFD high yield deck that follows our IFD high yield guide. So you should be able to find whatever topic you're looking for in that deck, because it's going to have like every resource. But if you can't, then you may have to add a card. And that is a pretty easy thing to do too. You just click add up here at the top. You make sure that you have the deck that you want it added to selected. And you click add, and it will literally pop this up. And all you have to do is type in your fact, like John used to be more in shape than he is now. And if you want it to be a fill in the blank, which is called close on Anki, you just highlight what you want to be the blank, and then you'll come over here and you'll click these three dots, and it will do that for you. So this will be what is deleted. So that's kind of how you add a card to Anki if you can't find a pre-existing card to modify. Now, another thing that I do is if I run into a subject that I have known and I know that I have a card for it, but I've just completely forgotten it, then I will do what's called forget a card. So the way that you do that is, let's just go to browse and let's click a random card. You can see under this do right here that I have completed this card. Now, if you want to forget the card, then you will right click it and come down here and click forget and follow the prompts. Now what that does is it takes that card and it completely deletes all of your time data so that it will essentially be a new card, which might be like slightly depressing for some people, like, oh, I'm adding another new card. But the thing is, you don't know that fact. So you really should treat it as a new card, because it is a fact that needs to be refreshed and strengthened for you. So that's a great function that I have been using a little bit more than I'm proud of here lately, but it's better than acting like you do know. So that's how you learn from UWorld. Now the last big question is, how do you fit this into your schedule because you're already overwhelmed? Now this one's going to be a little bit more individualized. I'm going to put some of this more on you, but it kind of brings up natural questions like, how many should I be taking per day? How many questions should I be taking per week? When should you start taking questions in your content review? Stuff like that. So the UWorld MCAT question bank has around 3,000 questions, which is a lot. Now to me, I think it's silly to pay for the resource and not use all or most of the questions. So because 3,000 is a huge number, you are going to want to start early and do UWorld often. So if you are going to be a UWorld studier, then you should start taking UWorld questions a week or two after you start your content review. Okay, you want to have enough content learned so that you can select for the sciences that you know, but you want to get on it early, because 3,000 questions, especially MCAT questions that take forever to take and take forever to review, you're going to want to get started early. And I realize that it's not very popular to finish UWorld, but I still think it's probably the best approach, because the number one predictor for standardized exam success is how many questions you take. If you can take 3,000 of these and you can take another 500, 1,000 AAMC questions, it's pretty likely you're going to do a good job on the exam if you have learned your content as well. Now, because everybody's schedule is different, it's pretty hard for me to give a blanket recommendation on how often you should take questions or how many questions you should take per day. But I'll tell you what I'm doing for medical school, because medical school is essentially, with all the external studying, it's essentially like probably 40-ish, maybe 40 to 50-ish hours of studying for your actual classes per week, and then you have to fit in some step and stuff around that. So what I do is I have a goal of taking 1,000 UWorld questions per month. Now, I try to just take 40 per day, and that means I would get through it in 25 days, and I could chill on most of the weekends. Sometimes I'll take 80 per day. Sometimes I'll take 100 per day, even though that's a long day. But I go for a monthly total because the day-to-day looks a little bit different, and some days you're motivated. Why don't you stop at 40? Some days you're burned out. Why don't you force yourself to do 40 questions when you're just going to click through them? So how do you work UWorld into your schedule? You start it early and you take questions often. Now lastly, we have a Discord where we kind of study with some of you all and answer some of your questions about the MCAT, getting into medical school, what is medical school like, and I put out a feeler of what are some of the questions that you all have around UWorld and how to use it for the MCAT. And several questions popped up in the Discord, and I just thought that instead of working them into the video, which I did with some of them, I would just go ahead and read them and answer them here. So the first question is, what's more important, finishing the question bank and getting through all the questions, or taking and reviewing 50% of them? So I kind of answered this earlier. I think it's silly to take questions and not review them. So if you only have two options of take all of them and review, 20% of them, or take half of them and review half of them, then you would take half of them and review half of them. I would genuinely rather you take 25% of UWorld and review all of that than take 100% of UWorld and review none of it, because the review is where you learn. The best way to do this is just review the questions immediately after you take them. If you take a 10-question block, review them immediately after. It's a lot faster when you have that question fresh on your mind. The second question is, can you use UWorld as content review? I didn't even know this was a thing, but apparently some people, instead of like watching the con videos or like reading a book, they will just take UWorld and try to use UWorld as their content review. Maybe this is something that like an exceptionally bright student could do, and maybe I'm wrong, you can let me know, but that seems kind of incomplete to me. You're just kind of hoping and praying that you get enough UWorld questions that teach you the facts that you need, and also UWorld, I mean, you saw the explanations that they give you. It's not like they're a book chapter. They're essentially just like little blurbs about that one specific fact. So it doesn't teach you the whole concept. It just kind of wakens up some of those more high-yield buzzwords and stuff like that. So no, I would not say that UWorld would be sufficient replacement for content review. You could probably learn some buzzwords, but understanding all the sciences seems a bit far-fetched. And I could be wrong on that, but I've just never had any experience with it. So I would still do my content review. Now the last one is, how do you make a flashcard from missed questions? And we did talk about this one earlier. I use Anki, right? Some people are gonna use the UWorld flashcards, even though I just feel like it's bad to have 90% of your flashcards on Anki and then 10% on UWorld. That just seems silly. You'll always follow best flashcard practices, which are you want to include all the buzzwords and you want to keep it short so that you can go through it fast. And then if you have any extras, you can put it in the extra section or some graphs around it. The big one is, do not make a flashcard with an MCAT question on it. And I see people do this all the time, and I'm just like, dude, that's going to take you forever, number one. And number two, there's not like repeats on the MCAT. Okay, you're studying one specific MCAT question, it's not going to pop up again. And so you're not learning as much from that as you think you actually are. I know that was a strategy that worked a little bit in undergraduate, and I did it as well. It doesn't work for the MCAT. So whenever you're making a flashcard based off of missed questions, figure out what foundational science you are missing in your brain. Try to find a pre-made card that fits that, and if you can't find one, then go ahead and make that card in your Anki deck. So that's how you use UWorld, that's how you bend it to your needs, and that's how you make sure that you're being proactive to get the most from this resource, because it's an expensive one, but it's really good. And I've seen some students do really, really well in their MCAT after diving into UWorld. If you learned something from this video, please like it and subscribe to the channel. Check out the links below. Share this video or share the channel with a friend, another pre-med, or a pre-med advisor. And make sure to come back for more videos. We've got tons of projects going on that both relate to pre-meds and students in medical school. So check out the links below and you will see all of those. Thanks for watching the video, and I will see you in the next one.